Right.
My book up here. Heather, your book is so good.
Oh, thank you so much.
There it is. Yeah, I'm glad Jocelyn has one.
And I've got Jocelyn's book behind me
Oh,
too.
thank you.
It is.
I'm meeting in a different space than usual since I have family in town. So
Uh, oh, nice. So you're not in your usual
not in
little
my usual spot,
childhood.
no.
Yeah,
It's nice to have a usual spot.
Yeah, it
true.
is.
It is true. Well, maybe we'll just get started and let people sort of drift in. And I know people will watch. Hi, Dina. It's so nice it's been so long. I haven't seen you in so long. Glad you're here. All right, so I'll do a quick intro, but I feel like Jocelyn's gonna run this experience. But thank you all so much for being here. So tonight, well, Jocelyn will tell us about the book, but I'll tell you about Jocelyn. She is an award-winning memoir writer of the book Motion Dazzle. She's does a lot with Prose Playground. She's a writing instructor. She's a skating instructor and a skating champion. She's just kind of an all-around badass. Thank you so much for leading tonight. And I'm super excited to hear this conversation. So that will be it from me.
Thank you, other Jocelyn. I'm very honored to be doing this.
You're the other
And
Jocelyn. Just kidding.
yeah, we're each the other Jocelyn. Um, but this book, I really love this book. I find it to be very inspiring. Um, and I'm going to introduce Heather in a second, but this is a book about divorce and a specific subset of divorce because it's specifically military divorce. And I will say, we all read for different reasons, right? We read to relate to stuff, we read to escape, we read to learn stuff. And I really connected to this story through just the concept of change, of making pivots and making those difficult decisions in life. And I think that everyone, despite their, life situations, I am a child of divorce. My parents went through a divorce. And so that I really could connect to. But really, I latched onto this idea that we can be very stuck in something and we can get out of it. And it may not be easy, but we can. So that's really what I connected with this really beautiful and inspiring book. I want to introduce Heather, who is really a friend and a colleague and a writing partner and a launch partner and is many things. So I'm just really excited to be doing this with her. Our journeys with our books has dovetailed in a really wonderful, like mutual love kind of way. So anyway, I'm reading her bio now. Heather Sweeney is the author of the award-winning memoir Camouflage: How I Emerged from the Shadows of a Military Marriage. It's such a good title and it's such a good subtitle. It's like perfect. She writes about divorce, life as a military spouse, parenting, and women's health, and her work has appeared in the New York Times, a little place we call the New York Times, another little place we call the Washington Post, HuffPost, Business Insider, Today, Newsweek, Good Housekeeping, Healthline, Reader's Digest, Electric Literature, and Military.com, among many others. For people in Prose Playground who have been learning about the timely peg and about using timely things that are happening in the news and like sort of latching onto them and connecting their lives to them for personal essay. Heather is such an expert at this. She lives in Virginia and Camouflage is her first book. So I'm going to read the description of Camouflage, which some of you may have read, just to kind of get us set up for this convo, just to kind of give you the summary, because I know some people will have read this book already. And so for any of you who have not, I just want to give you a little taste of it. Camouflage is about a woman's journey from being overshadowed by her husband's military career to rediscovering her identity as a single mother entering a new stage of life. The memoir explores how, like many military spouses, she camouflaged her identity, conforming to the expected role of the supportive wife who was secondary to her husband's career as a Navy officer. But after she ended their 13-year marriage in her late 30s, she set out on a quest to figure out who she was as a woman without her husband, discovering that the hardships of military life, the forced independence, frequent loneliness, required adaptability, and fierce resilience had trained her for life after divorce. That's such a good description, and it really does do the book justice. So anyway, that's my long preamble to say welcome, Heather. We're so happy to have you at Prose Playground for one of our book club events.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to chat with you, Jocelyn. We've had, like she said, such a journey together with our book launches, and really don't think I could have done it without her. So I'm so thrilled that we could have this conversation together.
Right back at you. Okay, so I have got to ask you about the first scene. In my opinion, this is one of the best first scenes that I have read in a really long time. This is a masterclass in dropping your reader into the middle of a situation. And I would love for you to tell us what that scene is, explain that scene to us, why you decided to start there, and side note, why you decided to make it a prologue.
Right. That's wow. The journey was really, really long for me. And those decisions, I will start off by saying, really came in the revision process. I think so many people think that they need to get it perfect the first go round. And I don't think that scene became the first scene until probably the fourth or fifth draft. So when I wrote the first draft, which was a massive 115,000 words, uh, for anyone who doesn't know, memoirs are usually what, like 60 to 80,000 ish words. My first draft was 115,000. And I was also simultaneously reading through about 20 years of journals. And so I thought to myself, I don't even know that I have enough for an entire book. I'm just going to kind of write my story as I'm reading my journals. So my first draft was straight up chronological. There was no prologue. It just kind of, I'm like, well, I'm just going to start here where, we get engaged, and he announces he wants to join the military, shortly before our wedding. And then I kind of read Allison K. Williams' book, Seven Drafts. And she talks about the E structure in her book. And it's where you kind of start, like you had said, in the thick of things. And you start there just to kind of pull the readers in. And then you backtrack to like the beginning, like the real beginning. And then you kind of work your way towards it, and you're kind of wrapping around. Then you meet it back where you were. And then you keep going with the story. And I decided that that's what I wanted to do. I'm like, well, that's super cool. I'll make it the prologue. But the prologue that ended up in the book, which is, you asked me to describe it, I forgot. So this is where I had decided to leave my husband. I had gotten an apartment because for reasons he didn't want to get out of the house. I actually kind of did want to get out of the marital home. So I'm in this apartment and I'm moving out by myself. It was the first time I wasn't doing like a military move. So I had to do everything myself instead of like the military packing everything up. And so I get to this apartment. It's a 3-bedroom apartment. I've got my kids who are about 5 and 9 at the time. So they were littles. And the movers were done. And I'm like, I just wanted them out of my house and to start making this apartment my new home. And my kids' bedrooms were on the second floor of the apartment. Mine was on the first. And I go into my bedroom. I'm like, wait a minute, that mattress shouldn't be here. That's my son's mattress. That should be on the second floor. So I realized they didn't move the mattress upstairs. So I had to move the mattress upstairs because I was just bound and determined to make our first night in this apartment as normal as possible. Everything was so not normal. So I'm trying to like push this mattress up the stairs, and I'm a strong person, but it's, mattresses are pretty heavy. And I ended up kind of hiding behind the mattress to rest. And I just kind of lost it. And all of the emotions that I was kind of holding together for the kids, it just kind of came out because I was exhausted and just, it was just very emotional. And I've actually had a lot of feedback of people saying, "Oh my gosh, like you made me cry, like in the prologue." But that wasn't the original first chapter. My first chapter was originally something that happens later in the book, where my then husband, we're still married, and he hands me divorce papers on my birthday. And we're living in Japan, so we're overseas. And I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was completely helpless. And I started with that scene originally because I really wanted my readers to get the sense of how helpless I was and why it took me so long to leave the marriage. I didn't have any money. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place to live. My daughter was only like a few months old. I think she was 8 or 9 months old. And so I realized later that I don't know if anyone listens to, can I curse? Can I say a bad word? Um, the podcast, The Shit No One Tells You About Writing. Awesome podcast, highly recommend. But they always talk about the opening scenes and how opening scenes should have some movement. Like you don't just sit there. And I realized that entire scene, I'm just sitting on the couch folding laundry. He comes in, hands me these papers, and he leaves. And I'm like, there's just no movement. But I was kind of like, oh, this is it. This is the scene. So then I had a developmental edit, and she was like, yeah, that's not your opening scene. And I'm like, darn it, I gotta go back to the drawing board. And she gave me some wonderful tips. And the mattress scene was one. She said, I think this is really moving. People will understand the gut wrenching decisions that you had to make, to move on with your life. And so, yeah, and I decided to do it as a prologue just because chapter one really does go back many, many years. It goes back, I guess, must be 13 years. So I'm like, okay, this needs to be a prologue to let readers know that, chapter one is going to start in a different timeline. And then the rest of the story is chronological.
Well, I mean, I think it's very metaphorical too. So it's got action. So you're kind of like, what's going on? It's got a lot of emotional impact, but it's also so metaphorical. It's like Sisyphus pushing this thing. I mean, you're like, it's like you really have the weight of the world on your shoulders. And if I remember correctly, your young son is right there, like helping, not helping. And it's just like, wow, it kind of brings the whole story. You're not giving anything away, but it kind of brings the whole story to the fore right from the beginning. And that's what's
Yeah,
so
and
great
and
about
it's, I mean, it's not a spoiler that I got divorced, right? Everybody knows that the divorce is going to
yeah.
happen at some point. So I'm like, well, there's no spoilers here. But yeah, and my son had offered to help, and like I said, he was only like 9 years old, and he's like, "Mom, I'm strong." And I never wanted, my kids to feel like he needed to be the man of the house or whatever. So then I kind of was like, you know what, this is teamwork. Let's do this together. But yes, it definitely felt like I was pushing something hard up the stairs.
Yeah. So tell the group a little bit about your writing history before you decided to write the book and what then punted you to want to write the book.
Yeah, so I have no educational background whatsoever in writing. I have an undergraduate degree in psychology and a master's degree in elementary education. And when we moved from Japan back to the States, we moved to Virginia. I was going to be a teacher, and I ended up being a kindergarten teacher. But my then husband was traveling a lot for the Navy, and he was about to go on a deployment for 6 months to the Middle East. And it was my mother-in-law at the time who was like, why don't you start a blog? And I'm like, I don't know anything about blogging, but okay, it'll give me something to do after the kids go to bed and I'm alone. And so I started this blog, and it was called Riding the Roller Coaster. And it was about just being a military spouse. And I kind of started seeing all of these other military spouse blogs, and they're all writing about things that I didn't think we were supposed to talk about, because it's kind of this unwritten rule as a military spouse. Well, you knew what you were getting into, so don't complain about it. And so I never really complained about the hardships and being alone and all the moves and the deployments and fear for his safety. And so I really just got more and more into writing, more comfortable about writing about my personal experience. Ended up getting a job. I was able to quit my job as a teacher, and I worked for a military news website. And after the divorce happened, I ended up writing this article. It was actually a long Facebook post, and my boss saw it, my supervisor, and she was like, no, 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 take that down off Facebook, write an article for us. So it was called 5 Marriage Tips from a Divorced Military Spouse. And it just kind of went bonkers, like I say viral, but like in our little military niche, like I was just getting emails like crazy, whether it was from military spouses facing divorce. And I'm like, thank you for talking about this. Nobody talks about military divorce. Because again, not supposed to complain about military life. And other women saying, thank you for the tips. Like, I'm struggling in this life and I'm struggling in the marriage. And it's really hard to go to counseling when your husband's never home. And so it's just a lot of feedback, and enough people were saying, you need to write more about this. You need to write a book about this, because there's literally no other books out there on military divorce. So that's when I dug up the journals, and I was like, I don't know, maybe I've got enough for a book, maybe, because at the time I was writing a novel and I had no intention of writing about this divorce. So yeah, it ended up, I did have enough for a book.
Well, that is
Yeah.
interesting how you're kind of like I think comedians do this. They work through their material on the stage. I think blogging can be the same thing. Like you're working through your material kind of in public, and when you get that feedback, you can sort of run with that if you do get that kind of encouragement. I think that's really great. And I just wanted to say one little thing that's interesting about your story. You're not supposed to write about the military because you knew what you were getting into, but I think one of the interesting parts of your story is that your former husband was not in the military when you met him. It was a decision he made after you met. And that's
Absolutely.
especially feels, I think that makes the story feel especially claustrophobic because you didn't really opt into
Yeah.
it.
I did not. And honestly, neither of us knew anything about military life. And when he said, oh, came home one day and said, well, I want to join the military, I kind of half like didn't even believe him. Like, oh, okay, this is another like, you know, we were 23 years old trying to figure out what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I was like, okay, let's just go for it. Let's go, like I say, join the Navy, see the world. And I'm like, okay, let's do some traveling. And I didn't know any military spouses. I didn't know the lifestyle. He came home with a book one day, and it was, some guide to being a Navy wife. And I was like, okay, I'll read this. And it's almost like motherhood. You never really know what it's going to be like until you're in it, and you're like, wait a minute, I wasn't expecting this part.
Oh. Oh, this
Yeah.
is how this goes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And again, like I would meet other Navy wives, and I just noticed that nobody really like talked about the hardships, and everybody also talked about like we would go to parties, we called it mandatory fun, when you had to hang out with the other, your coworkers. And it was always like, hi, I'm Heather, what does your husband do? Or like it was never really about like, oh, hi, I'm Heather, I'm a teacher, or I want to be a teacher, or like, I'm getting my master's degree, or things like that. Everything revolved around the husbands. And I will say there are male military spouses, but in my experience, most of them and most of my friends were women.
Okay, whether it's your next book, whether it's a novel, whether it's a memoir, I would like it to be titled Mandatory Fun.
I
That's
love that.
awesome.
Yes, the military really likes to have their terms and their
Yeah,
and acronyms, and
yeah,
yes, there's a lot.
yeah,
Yeah, mandatory
yeah,
fun.
yeah. Okay, well, this concept of, what you can and can't write about, kind of segues nicely into this concept that so many memoirists grapple with, which is how do we write about people who are still living and who are still in our lives? And how do we tiptoe? How do we either gallop into that, or how do we tiptoe around it? One of the things I think is also interesting, and you've already said it in this meeting, is that your mother-in-law, so his mother, was very encouraging of your writing, and I know is still a part of your life quite nicely, and a part of obviously your children's life. So I'd just love to hear how you navigated that minefield. Sorry about that pun.
That
But
was a good one.
but we all kind of have to figure that out, how we write about family and other people.
It is very tricky. And I think that I got some good practice because so in the state of Virginia where I live, if you have children, you have to be legally separated for an entire year before the divorce is final. And so when we decided to get divorced, he had asked me, because at this point I was already blogging, I already had a job as a professional writer. He said, could you please do me a favor? Could you not write about this for the entire year that we're separated? Can you just wait until we're like fully divorced? And my instinct was, no, I could write whatever I want. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, okay, he's specifically asked for this. And I'm like, well, I don't want to get sued or, or just any backlash. And I still wanted my kids to have a relationship with their grandparents on that side. So I'm like, okay, I decided at that point, I'm going to just journal voraciously. And I was so glad. So I did not write about the divorce until the day I got divorced, and I announced the divorce in the New York Times, which is another one of my favorite stories. So I had worked with this New York Times editor twice before, and one of the essays I'd written for him was about how my husband and I were in counseling, we're in marriage counseling. So I emailed him one day. I'm like, hey, it turns out the counseling didn't work. We're getting divorced. I'd like to write an essay about it for you. However, I was asked not to write about it until the divorce is final, but my court date keeps getting pushed back. So he's like, look, send me a draft. I'll edit it. I'll just have it ready to go. He was awesome. He sat on that for like 2 months. So sure enough, I leave the courtroom, email him, we're good to go. About an hour later, it's live up on the New York Times. And the first line of the essay is, today I got divorced. And that was kind of like my litmus test to see how my ex-husband would. And I really this, this was not a revenge memoir. This was nothing, like I didn't want to get back at him for any reason. I didn't want to air a lot of dirty laundry. I just kind of wanted to take control of the narrative in a way that didn't drag him through the mud. So I thought, okay, this is a good test to see how he feels. So I actually texted him the link and said, just an FYI, I'm announcing it. And this is what I wrote about it. So I did, I pushed him the link and he read it and he texted me back and he said, congratulations, this is a great essay. And that is really how it's been ever since we've been divorced, and we've been divorced about 13 years now. Um, so as far as what to leave out, going back to that first draft of that 115,000 word monster, I had decided, again, I'm just going to write down everything. I'm not going to leave anything out. Nobody has ever, and to this day, nobody has ever seen that first draft. This is just for me. I'm just going to kind of test the waters. And yeah, like the ugly, dirty stuff, sure, that was in the first draft. And then when I read the second draft, I think as I did 11 drafts in total of the manuscript. And as each draft went on, and I started the book in my first draft in 2018. So as I got a little bit farther away from the divorce and the events of the book, things softened a little bit with me. So I wasn't as bitter. And I am so glad I didn't publish anything of the journaling that I was doing in that first year of separation, because it really was ugly and raw and bitter and just did not need to be out in the universe. That was just for me and processing. So when I went in to do the second draft, I really looked at tried to look for things that sounded bitter and vengeful and like victimizing. Like I also never wanted to come off as a victim, because I wasn't. I chose the divorce. I wanted the divorce. So after the second draft, I did cut a lot. I think after the second draft, I had about 90,000 maybe words. And I save everything. Nothing was ever thrown out. I do have a Google Doc that's called Memoir Scraps. So I am working on a novel. So maybe some of those might show up, maybe. But I did also, after the second draft, I had some beta readers, and those beta readers were my parents and my best friend who was in the book, and one of the therapists who's in the book. So my first four beta readers were actually people that I wrote about. And I did make some more cuts, things that were like, this is a little questionable. And also things that didn't move the story forward. Like there were certain things where I really don't need to say this about my ex-husband because this doesn't do anything for the story. This just is me venting, right? And this, I don't want this book to be about venting. I've already done that in my journals. So I just kept cutting more and more, and I learned as I went on what moved the story forward, what didn't. There are certain things, like I mentioned, the divorce papers on my birthday. A lot of people, as they were reading the book, like friends, people I know, would like text me when they got to that scene, like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea he did that." And that wasn't vengeful. I mean, that actually happened. Um, but it was important for me to include that because that was the very first time that we ever talked about divorce. So I thought that that was a pivotal moment that needed to be in the book. Um, and like it didn't happen right away, like we didn't get divorced. So it is very, very tricky to navigate that. I didn't write too much about my kids. And you know, they were 5 and 9-ish during the divorce. They're now almost 19 and 22. So um, you know, I did ask them if they wanted to read drafts. They're like, nah, we're good. I did change all of the names. The only names that are real are the dogs. Um, and I say in my little intro in the beginning that they would want you to know that they were very good boys. So their names are real. But yeah, I changed everybody's names. It was very important to me to protect their privacy in that way. And probably one of the next questions is, has my ex-husband read it? I have no idea. He has not said anything to me. Um, he's not pushed back. I do know that both of his parents have read the book. Both of his parents came to my virtual launch party. So they have both been very supportive of my writing career. I'm reading in the chat, did any of their friends read it? My kids' friends? Um, yes, actually both of their partners have read it. Which is kind of weird. Um, but yes, a couple of their friends have read it. Have my own kids read it? No. I know they've both started the book. I'm pretty sure my daughter will finish it. I'm not sure my son will. Um, you know, they're not big memoir readers, especially from middle-aged women. So, but my daughters, I might be jumping the gun here with questions, but a lot of people ask me what their reactions were. My son is just like, you know, oh, you wrote a book, okay. But my daughter I was like, well, what did you think? Like, where are you at? And she would tell me where she's at, and her boyfriend read it, which is she's like, oh yeah, he read it, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. But she said it made me sad, and I was like, well, what about it makes you sad? She hasn't gotten to the second half of the book. And she said, it makes me sad to see that you were so sad for so long. Um, which of course, it was like an awe moment. And I was like, keep reading, keep reading. And of course, I'm like, well, it has a happy ending. So just keep reading. But yeah, I don't know if they'll finish.
I mean, let's acknowledge it must be very strange to be in someone else's book. There should be like a
Yes.
support group, like a support group for like, I was in someone's memoir, like where they
Mm.
can go and like talk about how weird that is.
I agree. I
I think
agree.
I acknowledge I have to admit, I've never been in anyone's book. And so that must be a strange dynamic. So there could be some resistance and they'll probably get to it when they get to it, right?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, they're both super supportive. Like my daughter has come to a couple of my book events, and both of my kids came to my online launch party last year, both from their dorm rooms in college. So they're both very supportive. But yes, I'm sure it is super weird. I've never been in anyone's book that I know of.
Yeah. I know. So I mean, so it's interesting. Like you talk about the big draft, the 115,000 word tome, and then you're talking about 11 revisions. And I think that is interesting. Like, we to hear the shitty first draft, the vomit first draft, but I think also that it could be positioned a little more positively, like kind of the therapy first draft. Like, what can we get from as a person from this journey of trying to put everything into words and organize those thoughts? So I just think like it gets us as memoirists, as people, to a slightly different place. And then the revision process is really enlightening. And you kept saying, like, does this, what was the word? You said, does this go in the book? Like, does this fit the story I'm trying to tell? And I think that that's an important journey in this. And I want to ask when the title came to you. It's such a great title, such a great subtitle. When did you have that from the beginning, or did that come to you along the way?
It actually didn't come to me at all. That was thanks to my developmental editor. So when I first started writing, I actually thought that I knew the title before I even started writing at all. And so my original title was Permanent Change of Station.
Mm.
And for anybody who, I mean, most people don't know this. So in the military, like I said, they really like their little terms. And so permanent change of station, or PCS, basically just means you're moving. Your service member has orders and you're relocating. And so I was like, what a perfect like play on words. I really wanted a title that was related to the military, but also kind of had a double meaning. And I'm like, well, my station in life permanently changed when I got divorced. So I'm like, this is the best title ever. And I'd say I hired my developmental editor maybe after the, let's call it the fifth draft, fifth, sixth. I lost track. Um, and one of the first things she said was, "Your title's got to go." And I was like, "No, we get so attached to our darlings, and that was one." And I'm like, "No, this was perfect." And so she said, first of all, nobody knows what that is. Nobody knows what a permanent change of station is. When you're in the military and you hear these terms constantly, like for me, it's old hat. Like, oh yeah, it's a PCS. I'm like, how cool! I could go to book events and shorten it to PCS. Um, but she's like, first of all, nobody knows what that is. Second of all, you have no idea how many times you're going to say the name of your book over and over and over again once it's published. That's really clunky to say, permanent change of station. And I'm so thankful that she helped me change it. So she said, I want you to sit down and brainstorm every single military term you can possibly think of that like you said or your husband said or your friend said, whether or not it even relates to your story. Just write down everything. I mean, I was Googling, I had a list, I must have been like 50 terms or something. And finally, when I just couldn't look at it anymore, I'm like, here you go, I'm done, I can't think of anything else. And she said, Heather, I went down the list and immediately camouflage. It was immediately camouflage. So I guess I did think of it, but it never occurred to me that that would be a title. And as soon as she said it, she's like, how did you not think of that to begin with? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Um, so yes, she helped me come up with that. And then I really did play around with the subtitle a lot. And I actually think I'm in a writer's group, and I kind of got into the group one time and gave like three different um, like options for subtitles, and you're in that group. And everyone chose the same one, and it was this one. And it was actually, it came to me like that. It wasn't even my first choice. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to brainstorm a little bit. And I think camouflage and shadows kind of play with each other. Um, so, so
Yeah, for
yeah.
everyone, if you're not looking at the book, it's the subtitle is How I Emerged from the Shadows of a Military
Hmm.
Marriage. So I
Hmm.
think it's good because it takes the concept of camouflage and it elevates it, or it gives it another layer, and it really does tell us about the story that they're going to be reading. I think that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, and she was my developmental editor would really help me. She's like, let's try to find something that shows how your identity was really secondary to his and you were kind of like hidden. And she's like, yeah, this all kind of ties in together. I'm like, perfect, thank you.
I
So
mean, no
yeah.
shade. That other title I think was kind of cool too. I don't think it was horrible, but
It wasn't,
I
I mean, it was
yeah.
the worst thing ever. But
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I'm really glad that I'm not going to book events and saying permanent change of station,
Yeah.
over and over and over again.
So share with people a little bit about your oh yes. Okay, let's do there's a chat question that's
I
somewhat
just saw
related
it.
to this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy.
Hi,
So why
Amy.
did you pick red?
Yeah, so there's an entire chapter of the book basically dedicated to the color red. First of all, it's my favorite color, but in that chapter, I discussed how there were so many parts of my marriage, maybe because I was so young. We got engaged at 23. I was 24. I just turned 24 when we got married. And I really didn't know myself when we got married. I mean, who knows themselves when they're 23, right? And like my son's 22, and I can't imagine me being in, that kind of really getting ready to, meet my fiance. And um, I felt like when I got divorced, I realized how much of like I adapted his likes and dislikes. Like even simple things. When I looked around the house and I was packing out to move, I really did go around the house with a legal pad and a pen, and I had little columns, mine, his, and to discuss all of our possessions because you've got to split everything up. And it occurred to me like everything in the house he had bought or picked out. Like nothing. I looked around the house, I'm like, everything is blue or gray or, white. Like everything was just very kind of like a neutral tone. And I'm very not neutral. Like I like bright colors and I love red. And so when I moved out, I'm like, I need to find like the sassy, colors in my own personality. Again, another metaphorical aspect of the book. And so like I remember going to Target and of course because I had to, buy things for my new apartment, I bought red bed sheets, red plates, red shower curtain, little red, rugs, like all of this red. And I'm just like, this is what I've been missing. Like I want to be excited and like just brightness. And so when it came time to do the book cover, we had a couple of iterations of the book cover with my publisher. And when they came back with one that was red, I'm like, that's it. Like, I didn't want camouflage on the cover. I think someone had mentioned doing like a pink camouflage because it's kind of girly. I'm like, no, 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 I do not want the camouflage. Um, and so they came back with the red, and I'm like, that's it. That's perfect because red is in the book. And I try to wear red too. So I got my red on tonight too. But yeah, it's still my favorite color. For one of my book events, I did the tips of my hair, dyed the tips of my hair red. So I like to have fun with it now.
Love that. Love to see
Yeah.
it. So, you do this big draft, you're whittling it down, you're getting beta readers. Tell us a little bit about the road to publication.
It was long. As we all know, it's very, very hard to be patient. And I tried to be as patient as possible because I did see improvement with every draft. And so, like I said, I started jotting down notes. I'm a pantser. There was no outline for this book, but I did start jotting notes in 2018. And then after the second draft, I had the 4 beta readers. And then at some point, an agent reached out to me on Twitter, the old Twitter. I still call it Twitter. And she said, I'm closed to submissions, but I'd love to, for you to query me. And my query letter was kind of sort of ready, but not really. My proposal was kind of sort of ready, but not really. But I was in such a rush to be like, oh my gosh, an agent came to me. That never happens. I got to jump on this. So I real quick at some point I had the Witches of Pitches, and it was Aileen Weintraub and Megan Margulies, and they critiqued my query letter. And then I sent it off to the agent. She immediately, like within minutes, requested my proposal and the full manuscript. And then I never heard from her ever again. And I was devastated, absolutely devastated. And I took a break. So I did, like I said, have editors look at my query letter. They gave me so much confidence and tips. And I'm a huge fan of editors. I tell writers all the time, do not think that you have to do this alone. You should not do this alone. You should have beta readers, you should have editors, whether it's for your query letter or your manuscript or even just a couple chapters. 50, a lot of editors do 50 pages. Just have help because I never could have done this without help. So then I took a little bit of a break because I was really burnt out on it for a while. I was really devastated about the agent. I really did. I followed up with her like a year later, nothing. And so then I did finally get an agent after the developmental edit. And I think I queried 45 agents, but I got my agent with um, online. It was a live pitching. There was the nonfiction writers conference, and they had a pitch the agent session. And I'm like, oh, well, I'll apply for this. And I got chosen. And so I live pitched 3 agents and an editor, and you had like 5 minutes. And I mean, I was just sweating and sweating. But the agent that I ended up signing with, she immediately like messaged me in the chat, which they weren't supposed to do that. They were supposed to go through the director of the conference. But she's like, I want your book. And so yeah, I ended up signing with her. We went through 2 more rounds of edits, me and my agent. And that's another thing with the process. She was starting to see things as far as leaving things out. She's like, look, this is a little touchy about whether or not you should keep this in as far as like what you're saying about your ex. Let's take out this chapter, but I want to know more about dot dot dot. So like she was kind of getting me to flesh some things out that I didn't think were important to the story. And she's like, as someone who's never, I don't have any experience with the military, like write more about this. And so she really helped in those 2 drafts to kind of get rid of some stuff that was a little questionable and unnecessary, and then putting more in and little things. Like I wrote too much about my time in Japan because I loved living in Japan for 3 years. And she's like, yeah, that's not doing anything for your book. She's like, write an essay about that, which I did. And so then I had a couple more beta readers before we went out on submission, and they were both military spouse writers. And they did a lot of like fact checking, making sure I got all my military terms and timelines correct. And so then after the 2 more beta readers, we went out on submission. And I did have an exclusive look from an agent who just wanted it before we went out on submission to everybody. And she gave us a pretty quick no, which was a little disconcerting. But it was a big 5, 8 editor. And so we kind of weren't surprised that she said no. So yeah, we went on submission, and within, I don't know, 3 days, I got an offer. And so we went back to all the other publishers to kind of follow up, and that was my only offer. And we kind of, did our little negotiations and got myself a book deal. I'm with, for those who don't know, I'm with Post Hill Press, and they have an imprint called Knox Press, which is just for military stories, military books, nonfiction and fiction, I believe. So I am with their imprint. And yeah, then it happened very quickly from there. So I signed my publishing deal February 2025, and the book was published in October 2025. Talk about a whirlwind for anyone trying to publish a book. That is highly unlikely to happen. Jocelyn, I know your book, the process from signing the deal to publication was a lot longer. They really wanted to get the book out ahead of Veterans Day, which is in November. And because I'd already done so many developmental edits, they're like, your book's ready to go. Everything's ready to go. And the acquisitions editor that signed me, she was actually already following me on Twitter. And she said she knew, because I used to tweet about writing and my process of getting an agent and about to go on submission. And she was like, I was just waiting for your manuscript to hit my inbox from your agent. So, because again, it was a military imprint, so kind of low hanging fruit that they would get it. But so she knew it was coming, which is great. I mean, how cool is that? She saw that on social media.
Yeah, I always thought it kind of blew my mind. We for a lot of us, it takes a long time to get to the contract, and then usually you have to wait a really, really long time just to get it to print. But yours was like, boop, it was like, it was just like a kind of a whirlwind that I remember.
It was.
Yeah.
I was very lucky, but also like lucky to find a publisher that really, loved military books. And I have a lot of military spouse friends. A lot of people don't either. There's just not a market for like straight up military books. In fact, when I was planning during the promotion of this book, I kind of accounted for the fact that there are very few military spouses out there, which is my number one target audience. So I tried to market it as a divorce memoir with a military backdrop instead of this is a military spouse memoir, because obviously the population of divorcing women mostly women was my target audience, is a lot larger than military spouses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask maybe one or two more questions, and then I'd love to open it up to the group. So if anyone has questions, either put them in the chat or you can go off mute and ask them verbally. Um, what has been the coolest part about having this book in the world and, having people experience your words and experience your story?
Um, Gosh, I think one of the coolest things is how many people come to me, not military related people coming to me and saying, I really had no idea the hardships that military spouses go through until I read your book. And I think that that is so important because the military is still in the news. Like, it's not like what I went through was unique. Every single thing that I went through with the deployments, we're still deploying to the Middle East. Military families are still moving every 2 years. Military spouses still can't hold down a career because they're moving every 2 to 3 years.
Mm.
And so many people don't think about that. You see people in the news, you see deaths, you see deployments, you see the latest, the aircraft carrier that are such harsh conditions that sailors are jumping overboard. And like, this stuff is still in the news. And I got divorced 13 years ago. And so I think it's really important that people understand, yes, you're seeing the hardships of the military, the people who serve our country on the news, but you're not seeing the people, their families who are supporting them. And it's not just the spouses too, it's the kids. I mean, these kids aren't seeing, one or both of their parents. There are a lot of families that both of the people in the couple serve. So it's just been really heartwarming to try to bring to people's attention, um, hey, this is a lifestyle that really nobody talks about. But there's so many spouses who are really, really struggling with whether it's the lifestyle or, I mean, there are year-long deployments. That aircraft carrier I was talking about, they've been out for almost a year. That's a really long time to be gone from your family and to be living in like this little tiny bunk on a big ship out to sea. So it's just been really nice to hear people kind of just bringing some attention to an issue that I had to live with, and a lot of military spouses are too.
Yeah, it was extremely eye-opening. I knew nothing about being in the military or being, a supporting family to someone in the military. So that was really interesting to me. So let me open it up to questions. Put something in the chat or raise your hand with a little function or raise your actual hand. That's fine too. Yes, Dina.
I have a craft question, if that's okay, kind of more structural. So you begin your story in the middle, then you go back to the beginning and you tell it chronologically all the way through. How did you approach when you got to the point, okay, this is where I started? How did you make that transition? How did you think about resolving that? Because that seems to be, it's my big problem.
You mean the first chapter after the prologue where I would start
Yes,
the real
where you
story?
caught up to, yeah.
Yeah, I
The
did. I
macro
struggled with that too. And in fact, in my first draft, I did start earlier, like when I met him and things like that. And I guess because I had to cut so many words, I'm like, do I really want to start this far back? And I didn't. And I thought that the most important thing where this story really begins isn't where I met this man or how I met him or who introduced us. It was what really changed the trajectory of my life that causes this entire story I'm writing about. And that was when he came home one day and said, I want to join the military. Because that completely changed our marriage. It completely changed my life. And so I think you probably just need to figure out, like, where does your story change your life? Why are you writing this story, and where does that start? And for me, that was but again, that didn't come to me until at least the second draft, maybe even the third. Um, and that's when, and maybe it was after the beta readers who said, really, wow, I can't believe, like, you guys were already engaged and, you're about to get married. And he comes home one day and makes this life-changing announcement. And so that's when I did get that feedback. I realized, okay, well, this is the moment. Because for me, it's like, oh, that's, just a memory I have and whatever. But yeah, that was the moment where my life really changed.
Thank you.
I
Great
hope that
answer.
helps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was really great. I was wondering, I know I'm like sorry that I'm all about the salacious stuff, but I feel like I want to know, I just like when you read a breakup memoir or just somebody's story about like a trauma in their marriage or whatever, it's always like a little bit like you're always a little nervous as a reader, I think. At least I am. And I feel like you handled it really, really beautifully, especially because it was the father of your children, and that's not going to change right throughout their
Right.
lives. And also probably people that you love him. So I guess I'm wondering, a couple of things. Like one is like, did you find yourself forgiving him in having to really consider his experience as you wrote? Or like, I don't know, tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, so I had read before I started writing this, once you realize you're writing a certain kind of memoir, you start reading other similar memoirs because you know you're going to need comps, but also you kind of want to see how other people are doing it. And I wrote a lot of really great divorce memoirs, but some were just very, I am the victim. I, some didn't even end with like a happy, like I really wanted to end with a happy ending too. Like I really didn't want to play a victim. I really wanted to write this book at a point when I knew what the ending was going to be and that it was going to be happy and give people hope. Um, but I think that I learned from some other memoirs that seem to be really kind of bitter and saying things about their ex. And like, that was kind of cringy that you said that. And I can't even imagine like what your ex thinks about that, reading that. And it's, yes, I didn't want to say anything that my kids would read about their father that I would really regret or have to explain or explain to his parents or anything like that. Um, but I really wanted to just make the narrative mine. I didn't want him to like, I really did feel like my husband ran our marriage, whether he knew it or not. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But I really felt like after my divorce, I needed to start telling my own story and living my own story and living my own life. And so with each draft, I do feel like I did get a little bit softer and more forgiving of both of us. That forgiving is an important word, I think, because the first draft, one day I will go back and read it. I think there was a lot more like accusing aspects of it on my part. So I did look back and say, we were so young, we were so stupid and inexperienced. And what do we know about love? What do we know about being adults and, being neither of us had jobs, when we got together. And so, yes, I forgave him for a lot and realized I just, certain things to leave out. I forgave myself a lot too. There are certain things I think a lot of people in podcasts and stuff have been asking me, what's some advice you can give to women who are going through a divorce? And I always say you need to be gentle with yourself and not beat yourself up. And writing this book made me realize I beat myself up a lot during the marriage. So I need to be better. I mean, there were so many times, like one part of the book, I don't know if this made it into the book, but like he couldn't go to counseling because he didn't want it on his military record. And so like I went out and bought the book, like Dr. Phil's Relationship Rescue and the workbook. And I did the workbook by myself and like, oh, I think he would answer this way, you can't do that, right? So I forgave myself for trying so hard to fix a marriage that was broken pretty much from the start. I forgive him for, certain things that he did because we were young and stupid and because he wanted to be in the military. That was a career goal of his. And he was a career military guy. He retired, he's full military retirement right now, and good for him. And he's very proud of his military service as I am and the kids are, you know what I mean? And so I think I almost try to model the book as far as like what to put in the salacious stuff. I modeled after other books what I didn't want to do. I didn't want the anger and the bitterness to come through. I really wanted it to be a story of hope and a story of strength. And I knew in my gut that I could tell my story without dragging him through the mud. Because this story wasn't about him, right? My whole marriage was about him. This story was about me. I hope that answers your question.
And I think you did really accomplish that.
Thank you.
I was just really curious about that experience. So thank you for that. That was
So there's a lot of cutting as the drafts went on. Yeah.
That's
And
great. I
maybe
know.
when I cut the scenes, that was how I kind of was able to like get closure from it and move on. Now that you say that, I'm kind of thinking that like, oh, I'm cutting this scene, it's going in this other memoir scraps document. I've got closure on that. I don't need the world to know about that. I got my closure.
That's cool. Amy.
Hi. So,
Hi,
yeah,
Amy.
hi. So, I definitely think you did a great job of not venting, Heather. And I feel like,
Thanks.
from the kid's perspective, as a child of divorce myself or whatever, I'm like, boy, I could write stuff about my parents that'd be way worse than what you wrote about yourself. So at first that you did a great job with that. And I think also clearly a lot of people not knowing what is in military life, like especially the therapy. Because I know even with me, when I was depressed as a new military wife, and for, well, I'm sure a lot of different reasons. But I didn't even want to go because it would affect his career and he had a clearance too and whatever, much less trying to get, him, if he, he should have probably seen somebody too for, everybody is something, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, that is such a huge thing that they're trying to get somewhere with, I guess. But I thought, you did such a really great job with that. But also, with I would say that I just recently read a memoir that made me insane because literally, like, I feel like I need to have a therapy group about it with other memoir writers and just slam it because she put in so much information about people that she talked about somebody who's not even related to her, but she talked about somebody and gave personal details about him and his girlfriend who I knew who it was. And I didn't even know the woman who wrote it. But I wrote my friend and I said, is this you? And everything. And it was just a random, like random. And he's like, are you kidding me? And I said, you might want to know that you're in her memoir, 4 pages about you, including saying how his girlfriend was biracial and he was cheating on her and all this stuff. But she gave them fake names. So that's okay. But I'm like, and he's writing a 3-part trilogy. I was like, his age, like so much personal information. And it was just like, people are different who are younger. They're doing this. And so it had nothing to do with her life at all. That just she had met him once. And so I'm like, how did she even get published by a big publisher, But her book had to do about sex and sex sells, I guess, and whatever. So that's probably why she was even on Dan Savage. So and the rest of her book was terrible too. Like all of it was bad. Like I just would tear it apart. But I just started, this is bad. And when I got to that section and my head just exploded literally off my head. But I think that, you did such a good job with that and that, that I had to really give you a lot of credit for that because, it's just, you could tell you were taking your responsibility, his responsibility, and some things just were. And like you said, you got married younger, and and who knows and everything. So, but it would be interesting to know, just for you to like how much you had really taken out that you maybe don't even realize, whatever. So, anyway, so I guess it's more of a comment than a question. But like if you ever did, I know you said you haven't gone back, but it would be interesting to see if you went back and there's all the stuff they're like, nope, nope, nope. Or just maybe that's more of your personality than you realize where you were sorting it, beforehand too.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that too, because I think that, again, it was really important to me to maintain not just the privacy of my ex, but, his parents and my kids and even the friends. I write about some of my friends in Japan, and those are some other things that I cut out too, because like you said, like I knew some stuff that was going on with other couples, and that's not my business to tell, right? It didn't do anything to my story. Like that didn't affect me whatsoever. But yeah, I just really I didn't want it to be a blame game either, right? Like you said just now, I tried to take responsibility of some of my stuff too. Like for instance, getting married so young, I didn't know how to communicate. So I didn't tell him I was unhappy. I didn't like I begged him to go to counseling, but I also understood, like you were saying, that was very frowned upon. Now things are a little bit different now. There's online counseling. When we were in Japan, I write about this in the book, we couldn't go to counseling. We were at a very, very small Navy base in a foreign country. And the people that could have helped us at Fleet and Family Support, we socialized with them. Like we were going out singing karaoke and drinking sake with them. And well, that's kind of unethical to, go to them for counseling. And so I understood why he didn't want to go. It was very frustrating for me because I'm a huge proponent of counseling. I have a degree in psychology. Um, but these are other things that people don't really talk about. The very first marriage counselor that we saw together was Navy issued, and we used to meet at libraries and Panera because she supposedly didn't have an office. I've since heard that she's been fired. So I think shortly after, like
Oh,
whoever
good.
has not read the book, I don't want to give any spoilers, but
Yeah, that was
it
insane.
yeah, it was kind of an under the table situation
Um,
so that the guys in the command, it was not on their permanent military records that
yeah.
they had gone to counseling, because every time like you use TRICARE or you know, whatever, like these, and this is another thing too with the military mentality. Like when you think of military, what do you think of? You think of strong guys and Navy SEALs and strong mentally and strong physically. Well, that's what they kind of think of themselves too. That's what, you know, you go to boot camp, you got to get strong, and you do all of this training, you got to be strong, resilient, like all of these things, mentally tough. Those, that's what they hear all the time. So are they encouraged to go to counseling? No, they're not. Again, maybe things are different. Back when I was married to a service member, it was very much, you don't go to counseling. Like
Yeah.
counseling, what? And
Yeah,
so,
I'm gonna cut you off just because we're getting
oh,
close to time, but
yes, sorry.
I wanna, but don't leave because we're not done.
Don't.
And I'm gonna let Jocelyn wrap it up, but I want to just mention because we have our November book club is here.
Oh,
It's Linda Cass who is in my middle square. Her book, World News from Waverly High, and Marty Rostolen is going to be in conversation with Linda. So I just wanted to mention that this is for November. I'm actually going to put the links. These are the next three we have coming up. The top one is September. We have Jason Wyckoff. It's a book of like weird. I should have made it November or October because it's sort of creepy stuff, but it's great. It's a really interesting book. Snare for a Small Eclipse, and he's going to be in conversation with Francis Scott. And then we have another memoir in October, Imogen in Waiting, which is a lovely sort of reflection on parenting and BRCA genes and all these things. And it's Lindy Bartell and Kirsten Love. It will be Lindsay is the author, and Kirsten's going to be in conversation. So I wanted to mention that, and that is all I will say.
Great. Well, yeah, we'll wrap up. I'm gonna two more things. First of all, I'm gonna do the uncomfortable ask for Heather. She doesn't know I'm doing this. But the thing that could help that helps authors so much is to leave an Amazon review. So if you've read her book, then just go on, leave one or two sentences. And you know, don't love that company, but I don't know. You got to do what you got to do, right? The last thing is I just wanted to thank Heather and just ask if you have any parting words for people who are writing books, memoirs. You know, what's your biggest piece of advice? Like you've worked so hard on this book. You really took it all the way. And what would you say to other writers?
I would say a few things. First of all, don't give up. If you believe in your project, there is a way to make it happen. And there's self-publishing, there's agents, there's other publishers that don't require agents. There are so many different ways to get published. I think, you know, I say this all the time, but I talk to so many authors, and I really don't think that I've heard the same publishing story twice. There's so many different ways. You do not have to go big five. You do not have to get an agent. There are just so many different ways. And so if you're seeing all these people on social media, first of all the people on social media, they did not get overnight success. Like, oh, they got a book published. Like I said, I started writing this book in 2018. There's no overnight success. So don't give up, and understand that there are many different paths of publication. So you need to find what yours is. It could be completely different than anyone else that you've seen. And also, like I said earlier, get help. Join writers groups. I'm in multiple writers groups. Some of them have thousands of people in it on Facebook. Some of them only have like 10 people. I was in a book launchers group, and it was all a bunch of other authors who were launching our books within 6 months of each other. And so we helped kind of navigate promotion and publicity and launch parties and things like that. So get critique groups if that's what you're into. I know there are write-in sessions that you can go to. You know, maybe you need some accountability where you just sit on Zoom and just,
Tomorrow,
yes, right. See, I did a little plug for you, Joss.
thank you.
I have done that before. It's very helpful to just, I mean, even if you don't speak to each other, like you could just be like, hey, I'm going to write that, I'm going to work on this. And then like you have other people kind of looking at you like, oh, okay, they're writing. And it's a designated time of day. Like, okay, I know tomorrow I'm going to write at whatever time it is. And get, if you can afford it, I know editors can get very expensive. Maybe you can swap. If you can't afford a developmental editor, maybe you can swap services with another author. Help with, critique query letters. Help critique, even if it's not a whole manuscript, maybe it's a couple of chapters. But definitely get beta readers, get some other eyeballs on your work, because you're too close to your work to really see either mistakes or things that aren't working. Like I said, I think half of my book could have been about living in Japan, but every beta reader was like, you got to cut this. It's cute, but so you just need other people. Writing is such a solitary endeavor, but you don't have to do it alone. And there's so many different ways that you can find your community.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. Well, thanks. On that note, thank you to Joss and Prose Playground and to everybody who came tonight. And
yes, thank you so much, everybody, for coming.
Yeah. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Thanks, Joss and
Thanks
Jocelyn.
everyone
Thank
for
you
coming.
so much, everyone. Thanks.
Bye, guys.